What is up, Dragon fans? So yes, How to Train Your Dragon 2 just keeps bringing in the awards because it has now won 6 Annie Awards. Yes, 6 Annie Awards. I am so happy about that because this film absolutely deserves it. It is just, you know, How to Train Your Dragon 2, brilliant film, you know, all the hype, everything, it all paid off. It was just an amazing film altogether. Great animation, great characters, great story, just great everything. But yeah, anyway, on to the news. So, you know, obviously, everyone was interviewing Dean DeBlois because obviously How to Train Your Dragon 2 was winning all these awards, you know, so obviously, naturally, they were going to interview him and they were going to ask him, you know, oh, how's the third film coming along then? Because, you know, you're winning all these awards for the second film. Well, how are you going to top that with the third and final film in this trilogy then? And Dean DeBlois goes on to say, I'm halfway through the script. It continues to track Hiccup's coming of age, but it's also equally shared now that Hiccup and Toothless are chiefs of their clans. The story also follows Toothless' storyline, and I think audiences will like that because they seem to respond well to Toothless' antics and what seems to be going on in his head. So we now know that How to Train Your Dragon 3 will heavily involve Toothless, as it should, because apparently the third film will see the end of all dragons on Berk. You know, that's what How to Train Your Dragon 3 is going to be about. You know, the mystery of where did the dragons go? Why did they suddenly disappear? You know, kind of like the dinosaurs. Where did they go? Why did they leave? You know, will they ever come back? You know, and it's a really interesting question, you know, and it's really one which I think when this film does come around, and if they use that in the marketing, you know, for this film, you know, with the adverts saying, oh, find out where the dragons went, you know, why did they go missing? Why aren't they here today in our modern world? You know, I think if you advertise the film like that, I think that's going to get a lot of audiences hooked. You know, no matter what Disney have got out or whatever, you know, it doesn't. I don't even know what Pixar or Disney are putting up against this now since this film's coming out in 2018. But yeah, anyway, I think if you market the film like that, you know, parents will even go, you know what, I actually want to, you know, find out the answer to that. You know, I want to see how they pull it off. But yes, anyway, also, there's another bit of news as well, where Dean DeBlois goes on to say that the third installment in this franchise would, and I quote, continue to play with the timeline, but the story itself doesn't jump years ahead. It actually plays back in time and forward, so there's an element of meeting Hiccup at different periods of his life. I love this idea because literally I said to myself, if I was going to be directing How to Train Your Dragon 3, that's how I'd want it to be. I'd want it to jump back and forth in the timeline. So, you know, it starts off, you know, like at the start of the first book where Hiccup's an old man telling, you know, his young tribe saying, oh, there were dragons when I was a boy. You know, I think, you know, now what with Dean DeBlois' comments saying, yeah, it's going to jump between the timelines. So maybe the third film will start out as Hiccup as an old man saying to, you know, all the new kids on Berk saying, oh yeah, you know, there were dragons when I was a boy. And then, you know, it flashes back to when Hiccup, you know, 5 years after How to Train Your Dragon 2, is now 25 years old and is chief of his, you know, tribe, you know, the island of Berk. And, you know, and also, I love that how it plays with the timeline. So, you know, if anyone here is watching this right now and has watched Doctor Who, you know, especially Matt Smith's last ever episode, you know, The Time of the Doctor, you'll know how they sort of played with that timeline, where 1 minute he was young, and then you kept seeing him grow older and older and older. I think, honestly, that's what I wanted How to Train Your Dragon 3 to be. I wanted it to keep jumping between different time zones, where, you know, it's kind of like a narration where, you know, Hiccup's telling all these, you know, young kids on Berk saying, oh, all these stories about the dragons and how they disappeared, and as he's telling it, you visually see it, you know, as us audience, you know, we see it, you know, when Hiccup's still young and how we know him and everyone else today. But yeah, and he's telling the story, and I love that. So yes, How to Train Your Dragon 3 will be jumping through the timelines. You know, 1 minute Hiccup will be an old man telling kids how, you know, dragons were born, and then the next minute you'll see him like flashback, you know, to, you know, present day, where it's like he's you know, 25 now and he's leader of the tribe, and we're finding out where the dragons all went. So I love this idea. I love the whole concept of jumping between the different time zones. I absolutely love this. If I was directing How to Train Your Dragon 3, that I've always said to myself, that's how I would have done it. I would have gone the Doctor Who approach. You know, specifically the episode Time of the Doctor. If you haven't watched that episode, it's Matt Smith's final episode before he regenerates into Peter Capaldi. and basically, yeah, he's on the planet Trenzalore, and it keeps jumping like different time zones, like years and years later between the amount of time the Doctor spent there. But yes, anyway, I absolutely love this idea. Just want to let you Dragon fans know what's happening. There's been a ton of Dragons news, you know, concerning How to Train Your Dragon 3. I just want to let you guys know, so all you Dragon fans know, so you guys know everything that's going on. Yes, we've got years to wait until How to Train Your Dragon 3, but I don't care, because as long as they keep giving us news like this, I don't care. I'm still getting hyped. I still support DreamWorks all the way, no matter what Disney's bringing out. But yes, anyway, let me know, guys, what you thought of this news. Are you excited to see how they play with this whole jumping through the timeline thing, you know, between Hiccup's age?